looking car. He says, I don't think, he said, it's got to be something. He said, I think it's fixable. And I'm like, well, I'm just going to start it just to see what happens. I'm thinking, it sat for all that time. It's not even going to start. So I go out, I put the keys in it starts right up. And I'm like, wow, I didn't even think it was going to start. So I go in, I'm like, told the people I worked with who were there at the time, I said, didn't think this thing would even start as long as it sat. It started right up. And they're like, okay, well, let's take a look at it. And so they're looking under the hood, and it's like, well, I don't think it's a head gasket because your antifreeze, your coolant reservoir is full. Your oil looks clean. It doesn't look like you have any mixture of antifreeze with the oil. And the one guy who I work with, who's a counter person, he's like, well, start it up again. He's like, man, that sounds smooth. That doesn't sound like you got a dead cylinder. He's like, put it in gear. He's like, no, that's smooth. And they're looking at it, and they're like, well, there's your problem, or there's a large part of your problem. Your spark plug wires are shot. And they had white burn marks all over them, and basically the spark was arcing through, and it wasn't going where it was supposed to go. It was just jumping all around, and it couldn't get any juice. They replaced the spark plug wires, took it for a test drive, said, man, that thing runs like a scalded dog. I drove it the rest of the day. I've been driving it ever since. It's not a perfect car. There's no car that is, especially with over 200,000 miles on it. But it's like I wasted a month's time, a month of my time, a month of my dad's time. I was driving his car for essentially a month. All that time wasted. But I guess, as people pointed out, since I never did get a replacement car, I guess I wasn't meant to. But anyway, that's what I was doing for a month of my life, was basically just beating my head against the wall for no reason, or not making a productive use of my time. But anyway, on to the show. And like I said, I wanted to talk a little bit because I was talking about it anyway online, talking about it with two people and with people yesterday. And I wanted to talk about this press conference a little bit, this summit and this press conference that Donald Trump had with Vladimir Putin in Helsinki. Now, if you don't know, if you listen to the show regularly, if you've ever gone to the American Faith Today Facebook site, which again, at American Faith Today, or you can just type in American Faith Today if you have a Facebook account, do a Facebook search, and it'll take you right there, or it should. But if you don't know me, then this will be news to you. If you do know me, then you know that I have never really been a supporter of Donald Trump. I wasn't a supporter of Donald Trump when he ran in the primary, which a lot of people weren't. I wasn't a supporter of Donald Trump once he was the nominee. And I still haven't been a supporter of Donald Trump even now as he's the president. And during that time, of course, I encountered some of the same things that other never-Trumpers no doubt encountered, including leading up to the general election. What, do you want Hillary to win? And no, I never wanted Hillary to win, because when I started this show, which actually I started it, and after a while on the Blog Talk Radio Network, I would do a show once or twice a week. And I would do it consistently and faithfully once or twice a week, same time. Usually it got to be, I think, at one point it was on Saturday, and I think eventually it was on Sundays. It depended on really what days off I had for the most part. But when I started, I was basically, although I was my own person, had my own show, my own style, as I always have and always do, but politically, I was basically another, in terms of the show, I was another Limbaugh, Hannity, Glenn Beck, you name it, conservative talk show host. Kind of go after the Democrats, expose the left, what have you. And I'm not saying that's pointless at this point. I'm just saying that my views have changed and altered a little bit since then. I'm still very conservative in my own personal views, political views. you're not going to find anybody probably much more pro-life than I am. I'm very much pro-Christian values, traditional values. You will still find, hopefully, at least on occasion, me expressing those pro-life views on the Facebook page, speaking out against indoctrination of students in our school system, the LGBT indoctrination of our students and of our young people, and the religious liberty of Christian bakers, Christian florists, etc. And I'm still very fiscally conservative when it comes to this country and to the government and what have you. And it's just, especially once we got to Donald Trump, the realization that, you know what, we really don't have a good qualified choice or a good moral choice. And a lot of people would say, we're not electing a pastor, we're not electing any of that. Well, no. And personally, I would like to see a Christian, a legitimate Christian president. But at the very least, we need a president, or we should want a president with a good moral foundation, a good moral standing, a good character. And sadly, if you spend any time at all, even just listening to what comes out of his mouth, it's hard to say he has a good character. But if you spend any time at all looking into Trump's background and all of the people that he shortchanged, ripped off, all of the shady things that he has done, in some cases even to his own family, and I'm talking even beyond the divorces and what have you, it's hard to find a good character there. And again, keeping in mind, of course we're all sinners. Of course there's not one of us that's perfect. Of course all of us need to be saved by grace and forgiven by God through Jesus Christ. But, again, Hillary didn't fit for me. Trump didn't fit for me. You can look in the Bible. You can look in Exodus. You can look in Deuteronomy. You can find out how God said to pick our kings, to choose our leaders, our judges, various politicians, you might even say. And Trump didn't fit basically any of the qualifications. But nevertheless, of course, he was elected president, as we know. Now, this whole Trump-Russia thing has been, first of all, it's something that, starting out, I was very interested in, that I tried to be very much on top of, and now, I will say at this point to this day, I don't think there's a single one of us, obviously. In fact, I'll guarantee that not I, probably not you, not a single one of us knows, and I mean knows. Did Trump collude with Russia? Did he not collude with Russia? Everyone's entitled to their opinion, but not a single person knows. What I do know is that he's had a long-standing relationship with Russia, and it's been pretty well documented. It's been pretty well documented, and you can look it up online. You can go back. I've posted things on it in the past. In 1987, he was invited to Russia, I believe. Of course, this would have been when Gorbachev was president of Russia. But he went to Russia. He went to Moscow. They kind of rolled out the red carpet for Trump. This was still during the time of the USSR, of the Soviet Union, and it was weak, or weakening at this point. And of course, it wouldn't be, just a couple years or so later that you would have Ronald Reagan saying, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall," and you would have basically the literal collapse of the Soviet Union. But anyway, Trump goes to Moscow in 1987. They roll out the red carpet for him. From what I read, they really buttered him up, flattered him, appealed to his ego, which if you know anything about Trump, if you've observed Trump, that's a sure way into his heart and a sure way to basically kind of get him to bend to your will if you really want to get down to it. Butter him up a little bit. Tell him how great he is. And might I add, and go with this wherever you want to go with it, but might I add that for those who might listen to this show who are say, Shepherd's Chapel students who have studied with that great ministry, and again, or even if you've figured it out in your own Bible studies, that's kind of the way that Satan himself likes to operate, that his children like to operate, that they will flatter somebody to no end. And they will talk someone up, they will talk you up to no end to let you know they think you're really something special. That, man, have you got it going on, that you've got to be one of the most impressive, successful, intelligent people that they've ever seen. But friend, watch out, and especially spiritually watch out now, because there's always an ulterior motive to that. And I do like what the analogy that the late Pastor Arnold Murray would sometimes use, that a lot of times Satan will be talking about how great you are while he's got that little hacksaw, or whatever kind of saw that he's sawing the floor right out from underneath you, so you'll fall right through if you're not careful. And a little bit of a comical visual, perhaps, but at the same time, not so much. But anyway, he goes to Moscow. They roll out the red carpet for him. At the time, they were trying to cultivate still, even though it was in its waning days, they were trying to cultivate whatever assets that they could. Now, does that mean that Trump is a Russian agent or a Russian asset? I have no evidence of that. All we have are opinions. But he goes to Moscow, he comes back, and one of the first things that he does is he becomes very critical of Ronald Reagan and the way that Ronald Reagan is leading the country. Over the years, those relationships continued to build. He continued to develop more of an interest of maybe trying to expand some of his properties and his real estate and his business aspirations into Russia. We do have, I believe it was, I don't remember if it was Donald Jr., I think it was Donald Jr., who admitted at one point that they had a lot of money, that I don't know if it was most of their money, but that they had a lot of money coming in from Russia, from Russian investors, from Russian oligarchs, coming into Donald Trump and into his business interest. We know that Trump went over there to Moscow in, I believe it was 2013, with the beauty pageant. We know that allegedly during this press conference that Vladimir Putin would say that he wasn't aware that Trump was even in Moscow at that time, even though, and I posted this on the American Faith Today Facebook page, I just tried to pull it up. You can go there and see the article. Maybe some of you already have. It was from Max Boot. I just tried to pull it up, and it is giving me kind of a, I think probably because I've accessed the Washington Post a number of times, where now it wants me to subscribe or something to actually access the article. I had seen it when I first posted it, and Boot points out that Trump had actually sent out an invitation from Moscow to Vladimir Putin when he was over there. So, of course, Putin knew that Trump was there. That was a lie. A big surprise. But, this whole thing with Trump and Putin is certainly most interesting and most peculiar. And there's a lot of people that have obviously a wide range of opinions on where we stand or what we are to believe when it comes to the Mueller investigation, when it comes to whether or not Trump colluded. And what I do know is this. I do know that Trump made his own bed, that Trump caused his own problems by having people around him who were heavily connected to Russian politicians, Russian oligarchs who did some lobbying over in Russia, whether it was Paul Manafort, whether it was Roger Stone, whether it was Carter Page, whether it was Michael Flynn, that he had all of these people who had a connection to Russia. And let us not forget Felix Sater, who was tied into the Russian mob, who I believe his father actually was a Russian mobster, if memory serves, who worked right alongside